All right, welcome back to my channel, True Crime Fans. I'm your host, Tim Solberg, and today we're going to do something a little bit different with our video. So, had a pretty good experience about a week ago. It's an experience that most people don't like or try to get out of, and I felt like it was an opportunity for me to kind of see how our justice system works. So, I was summoned to jury duty about a month ago, and I just wanted to give you kind of a how-to approach jury duty and what to expect when you get to the courthouse. So, first and foremost, what had happened about a month prior to March, I think it was 24th that I ended up going in, I got a jury summons that came in the form of a postcard. Now, on that jury summons, it had my name, had the address of the courthouse, it had my juror number, and then it also had a phone number and a website that I could visit, so that way I could go in and kind of check to see if I was going to be summoned or not. So the first thing that happens in that first 4 weeks is it puts my status in on call. And what it says is that I need to be available for that entire week, so the entire week of March 24th. Now, it does give me specific instructions to either check the website on Friday after close of business, so essentially 5 p.m., but for our courthouse, it's all the cases go from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. essentially. So it says to check after 4:30 p.m. and that I can either call and put in my jury number, not the 245, but I had a specific ID number that went with my summons, and or I could put that in online. Now, what I would do is give that number or that ID number that they sent on the postcard, and I would put my birthday. I chose to do this on the website, which was very easy, and it tended to not change for the first 3 weeks, but as soon as it did on that Friday, I was able to see it right away. Now, when I went online, I selected that I wanted to get emails and text messages as well. So if there was any changes, I would get alerted to that. So that way, if I forgot about it, because it was, like I said, almost 4 weeks out, that I would get an alert. In this case, I didn't forget about it, but I did receive those alerts as well. Now, essentially on Friday night, I got an alert. I had already went and checked the website, but it just gave me some more instructions at that point and said, hey, we would like you to appear by 8 a.m. at the courthouse, right? Doesn't give you any more details than that, but it did give me a link to go check out what jury duty looks like in Iowa, and I can post that link down in the comments below. Okay, so from here, this is where my experience really starts. So I show up at the courthouse on Monday. There's about 300 total people that are there that have been summoned for jury duty. Now, I'm number 245. That number really doesn't play a whole lot of impact here, but I go into the main courtroom, and they've got us split up into 3 courtrooms just to start out with, and then we sit there for about an hour. Now, at 5 to 9, we have the folks that come in, the court administrators, and they start separating us into different groups. I think there was 4 groups total, and the group that I ended up in was the largest group. There was 150 of us that went into the largest courtroom in Davenport, Iowa. And once we got there, we had to sit for another hour, essentially. So what I will tell you is you're not allowed to bring your electronics. You're not allowed to bring an e-reader. You can't bring your phone, no tablets, nothing like that. Folks that have done it before, you could tell because they brought in their books or they did some research and they started reading. But for that entire 2 hours, with that exception of 5 minutes going from courtroom to courtroom, we just sat there, and it was really in silence. There wasn't a lot of talking going on. We were just trying to figure out what happens, right? So about 10:15, we had the prosecution come in. We didn't know they were the prosecution yet because they hadn't introduced themselves, but they had come in first, and they were there for about 10 minutes. A couple of minutes later, the court recorder came in, and then the court administrator came in. I would say about 5 minutes after that, the sheriffs walked in with the defendant, who is Justin Lamont Wright, and the defense team. And then a couple of minutes after that, I would say probably 10:35 or so, we got the call to all rise as the judge came in at that point. Now at 10:35, the judge did give us some instructions, didn't tell us a whole lot about what was going on, but she did read out the case, the defendant, and then had both the prosecution and the defense team introduce themselves to us. Now keep in mind, there's 150 of us in the room. So during this process, they started moving people around. So they had the pool of 150, which I was in, and then they had a pool of 37 based off of that. So what they did was they started calling out numbers, and then they put 37 people essentially in the jury boxes and then in the first 5 rows of the courtroom. Everybody else was allowed to sit wherever they wanted, but at that point, we all took a survey, which was a 4-question survey. It just basically asked us, have we ever been a victim of a crime before? Have we ever dealt with domestic abuse? Have we ever had a friend or a family that's dealt with domestic abuse? And then was there anything spiritually or morally that would hold us back from rendering a verdict, essentially? So really quick questionnaire, but on the questionnaire, it actually had a new number for us. Mine was 51, and basically everybody was numbered from 1 to, I think it was like 150. Okay. Now, once they had the 37, then we took a break. Now, we came back from break, and then they did a roll call, but they didn't roll call the first 37 because those folks were in specific seats. So the court administrator was able to see if all 37 were there. Now, what ended up happening is they went row by row, and each row was about 6 jury members. And they were trying to get down to 15 total members, 12 on the jury, 3 alternates. And this was all coming out of this pool of 37. So they started with the first 6, and that lasted about 2 hours. So it started with the prosecution asking questions of the 6. And every time there was something that came up for cause, like for example, one of the jurors said, I can't sit for 2 weeks. I just had surgery and I go to therapy 3 times a week. So then the prosecution asked the judge, hey, can we dismiss this juror? And the judge said yes. So at that point, that juror was dismissed. And then they would take out of the pool of 150. So that next person would be number 38, would now come and fill that pool of 37. So then they went in, and the first 6, they all got replaced, right? So after the first 6, they were all replaced. We went on break. We come back, we take roll call again. Then we went to lunch, come back, went on roll call again. And then the first day was over essentially at 4:30, and we only made it through the first 12 people. Now, out of those 12 people, we had 8 jurors that were replaced at one point, with the 8 coming down being excused fully for either medical or moral reasons or spiritual reasons. Now, they would have conversations in private, so we wouldn't see this for the most part. But if people were comfortable talking in public, we would get to hear their story, and then the judge at that point would make the decision if they could be released or not. Now, let me just go away from that for a second. I'll tell you what my perspective was. The people that were around me that were getting called into the pool of 37, a lot of them were getting frustrated and or kind of scheming on how could they get out of jury duty, right? They didn't want to be there, and we were told by the judge that this was going to be a lengthy case. It was most likely going to last 2 weeks, and then we would go to the jury, which could last, she didn't say how long, but she said it would take as long as the jury needed to render a verdict. So if we've looked at other cases, in my mind, I was looking at a week or longer based off of how many people were going to be testifying. Now, the judge did say that there was going to be 41 people that were testifying in this case, and there was a ton of evidence to go through. So they anticipated at least 10 days of testimony on top of jury selection. So that was going to put it at about 3.5 weeks. In my mind, I was looking at probably the entire week of April. I was somewhat excited, especially running a true crime channel. I wanted to see how the process played out. So again, I was number 51. I thought for sure I was going to make it into the pool of 37 because there were so many jurors going in that first 2 rows, which was 12. And then the judge did say, hey, we should have the jury by the end of day tomorrow. So we go back for day number 2, a lot of the same stuff. Very early on, by 9 a.m., they got all the way to number 50. Okay, I was 51. I was one away of getting into that pool of 37. Keep in mind, the 37 is the ones that are being questioned by the defense and by the prosecution. So from 9 a.m. to about 1 p.m., not one juror is excused at that point. I was so disappointed. But at that point, the judge did say that we weren't allowed to leave yet. And I figured once they nailed down the 37, the rest of us would be allowed to leave, but she did not let that happen. So what she basically explained was they did kind of a 2-in-1. So they were releasing jurors for cause, but they were also allowing the prosecution and the defense to ask their questions because each one of them would get their 10 strikes, which essentially turned into 11 strikes to get down to 15 people. And so we had to sit there through that process. It was about 30 minutes and it was dead silence. All you would see is that the court administrator was going from, the prosecution table to the defense table, showing them their list as they were going through and striking the jurors that they didn't want to have. And they could strike them for whatever reason. They didn't have to explain their reason. Each one of them essentially had 11. And at the end, they had the court reporter read out the 15 jurors that were left, had them all stand. And at that point, that's when the judge said, hey, you're all released. So that was my experience in jury duty. Now, I will leave you with this. I would say if you ever get the opportunity to serve on a jury, I think that it would be a great experience. For me, I wanted to be on that jury. I wanted to see what it looked like to go through the evidence and to listen to witnesses, to really analyze and to see how justice is performed in our court systems. I did get to see 2 days of questioning from the prosecution and the defense, and there were drastically different questions, but it was interesting to me some of the ones that they left on the jury versus some of the ones that they striked, quote unquote. And some of the questions were pretty interesting to me as well. Like it went everything from what kind of music do you like to do you own a gun to do you have siblings to have you ever had two siblings fight and what does that look like to break that up and things like that. So just things I would have never have thought of and how in depth some of those questions were, and to listen to that for nearly 2 days was very interesting to me. But for me, the whole experience was good overall. If I ever get an opportunity to do it again, I hope I make it onto the jury. Now do keep in mind, I say that with the intent of going in truthfully, honestly, fair, and consistent. And if I'm not chosen based off of that, I would be okay with that. But there was definitely, from my experience, a lot of people that didn't want to serve on the jury for one reason or another, and I respect that as well. But I would say if you get an opportunity to do it, it is a very interesting experience, and I got a very small glimpse of it, 2 days and only jury selection, but you're going to hear a little bit more of my experience when you hear some of these videos, especially when I do the Lori Vallow case this week. So on that note, I hope everybody has a wonderful week and a wonderful weekend. You made it through the work week, as I'll launch this video on Friday. And until my next video.